Welcome back to another video from Grounded. Today's talk is all about what is God. Now, God has so many associations, so many ideas that people have, whether they're religious, whether they are just general beliefs. There's so much association with the word, and also a lot of emotional pain and emotional joy behind the word as well. God has actually become a very powerful word. Now, to some people, God is the meaning of God is everything, and for other people, nothing at all. God is completely meaningless to a lot of people, especially in this day and age. Now, God is also the result of thousands of years of human torture and pain. But nevertheless, God has this idea of ava, that is other than us. That is an all-powerful entity that has control, has the ability to control our lives, and so we can end up coming to a place of almost feeling like life is happening to us rather than us being in the driving seat of life, rather than us having control over life. And so God has come up with all of these terms and ideas, and it's got really confusing and it's got really lost in what it is. So in this video I'm going to simplify what God is. God, in essence, is life. God, in essence, is life. Pretty simple, right? Now, we like to think of ourselves as other than life, separate from life. And that's because we have this personal viewpoint, almost like this single pointed focus that allows us to be in this position of observing the world as other from us. And so from this perspective, we can begin to generate the idea that I am separate from my environment, that I am separate from another person, that I am a separate individual, that I am a separate being. And on one level that's very true. That viewpoint does give us that feeling that I am separate. That personal sense of self is a form of separation. And so our personal sense of self can actually leave us under the illusion that I am separate from the world. But on a deeper level, on a much deeper level, everything is one. Our body is the formulation of life, and it's life that beats the heart, it's life that renews the body, it's life that is continuously giving. And when we look around, we are dependent upon the trees. We could also say that a part of us is external. We need the external to function. If we was to take our body and put it somewhere else, we would still need the environment. We would still need the environment for our body to function. We're always going to need the environment for the body to function. So on a mental level, that personal sense of self, it does give us that sense of isolation or that sense of separation. But on the physical, we are completely connected, interconnected with everything, dependent upon everything. So there is no, although there's our mental, our personal sense of separation, the physical, the body is within unity within the whole. So if we actually now life a little bit deeper, we say that life is what is underneath our personal sense of self. So life is underneath our personal sense of self. So life is now, life is what connects, life is what makes everything beat, life is what is giving life to every thing in existence. So existence is life. God is life, God is existence, God is life, and life is now. Now, what separates you from that your own divinity, that own inner knowledge of yourself as life, is yourself as this personal perspective. So it's this personal perspective that actually fogs our clarity of life, our knowing of life, our understanding of life, our recognition of life within, recognition that I am life myself. So personal sense of self, which gives us that viewpoint that I am separate, is actually what stops us from knowing and being one with life. We take on this personal sense of self. Now, this personal sense of self is a movement away from life. So our personal sense of self is a movement away from life, which is life being other, life taking on an other idea of itself. So as soon as life takes on another idea of itself, it becomes other. So this personal sense of self that we have, this thinking, this mind, this emotions, is other from God, other from life, is actually life being other. It's life under the illusion of itself as being separate from itself. So your personal sense of self is actually life becoming other, life moving away from itself, life moving away from its source, life moving away from its knowing of what it is and becoming other. So me as life is I am. I am life. I am to be present to life, to be present to this moment, to be present to now, is to have just the presence itself, the I am presence. That's life. I am is life. When we detach from our personal sense of self, I am David, I teach mindfulness, I am a father, I am is becoming something. I am is the presence is identifying with something other than itself. So I am a father. I am David. These are the very core of me believing it to be other, to be something other than what it is. Now, if you only know this personal sense of self, then the I am presence, life itself, that which you truly are, is completely identified with other, with movement away. And this is what thought is. Thinking is always movement away, movement away, movement, movement, movement. Every thought is a movement. And so if you're continuously becoming your thoughts, you're continuously becoming other. And the greatest other that we can become is separate. Our sense of self, that personal sense of self, is built on separation. It's built on the idea that we are other. It's built on the idea of me. And that personal sense of self is what causes disconnection. It disconnects us from life knowing itself. And so that personal sense of self becomes that heavy burden. That personal sense of self is built upon disconnection. It's built upon separation because we believe that we are separate from the world. And it's built on fear because our number one, when living in that personal sense of self, our number one need is to survive. And so, in that personal sense of self, we look for God as other than ourselves, not realizing that on the undercurrent of this personal sense of self is our body, and our body is one with life and it is dependent on life. And so, because it's dependent on one with life, surely that means that the well of life is within the body, or you are the well of life. And so mindfulness and meditation is lifting the veil, lifting that veil of that personal sense of self. And underneath that veil is life. So it's life becoming aware of itself. Mindfulness and meditation is life becoming aware of itself. Life lifting the veil of that personal sense of self. Realizing the well of its own source. Life realizing life. Life becoming life. Life awakening through a life form. And then instead of being that separate sense of self, we're actually blossoming into that deeper intelligence, that much deeper intelligence behind it all. And it's these little veils, these separate personal sense of self that we all develop. We all have this personal sense of self that create and separate us all up, when beneath we all function, we all thrive on life itself. We all interdependent and interconnected with life itself. And so when we all take off the veils, what's left? Only the oneness that unites us all, which is life, which is God. So God is within, God is life, life is unity. The only thing that is separate from life is that personal sense of self, which is life just moving away from itself, life becoming other, rather than life being what it is. And that's awakening. And life is beautiful. Life is intelligent. Life is love. Life is peace. Anyway, till next time, love, peace and joy.